act is betrayal? Is it the breaking of trust, the quiet dagger in the back? Or is it the silent recognition that someone you believed in never truly believed in you? The truth is, betrayal is more than an event. It's an earthquake inside the soul. It shakes the very ground beneath the person you thought you were, and it forces you to confront the rawest truth about human nature. That love, loyalty, and promises are fragile. When you are betrayed, something dies inside you. Not just your trust in the other person, but a certain innocence in yourself. The version of you that believed loyalty was unshakable, that words were sacred, that closeness was forever. Betrayal strips you of that illusion, and for the first time you realize, people are not always who they pretend to be. But here's the paradox. Though betrayal feels like destruction, it is also transformation. It doesn't leave you the same. It marks you, scars you, but those scars carry wisdom no book, no teacher, no philosophy could ever give you. The psychology of betrayal isn't just about the pain others inflict. It's about the new self that pain demands you to become. Most people think betrayal is simply the act of someone turning against you, a breaking of trust between two individuals. But beneath that surface interpretation lies something far more destructive. Betrayal is not just about the loss of another person's loyalty. It is about the collapse of a belief system inside of you. When someone lies to you, cheats you, or abandons you, what is actually shattered is not just your relationship with them, but the very structure of reality you thought you could depend on. It is like discovering that gravity can suddenly stop working, that the ground you always trusted to hold you is no longer safe. That is why betrayal is not experienced as a simple disappointment, but as a psychological earthquake. It uproots the illusion that love or loyalty is a guarantee, that trust once given is unbreakable. And because we build our lives around those illusions, when they collapse, we do not just lose others. We lose parts of ourselves we once thought permanent. The most dangerous misconception is that betrayal is external, something someone else does to you while you remain a passive victim of their cruelty. But in reality, betrayal forces a brutal confrontation with your own blindness, your own willingness to believe what you wanted to believe. You start interrogating yourself, replaying every word, every action, every moment that led to the collapse. You ask, how could I not see this coming? Was I naive, foolish, or simply desperate to hold on to a picture of someone who never truly existed? This self-interrogation is often more painful than the betrayal itself, because the enemy no longer lives outside of you, but inside your own thoughts. What makes betrayal so psychologically consuming is not only the broken promise, but the silent suspicion that you were complicit in your own undoing. That suspicion spreads like a poison until you no longer trust your instincts, no longer trust your judgment, no longer trust yourself. Betrayal reveals a hidden vulnerability in human nature that we prefer not to face, that people are guided less by loyalty than by their own shifting interests. Machiavelli warned centuries ago that men are fickle, that they will serve their own advantage long before they will serve your happiness. And though such words sound cold, betrayal proves them true in ways you wish they weren't. You begin to realize that people love in conditions. They are loyal in moments. They stay close while it benefits them. But when the current of their desire shifts, they will walk away without hesitation. The misconception that loyalty is natural, that promises are sacred, is torn apart when betrayal occurs. Suddenly you see that love without discipline is fragile, that trust without integrity is theater. This realization is brutal, but it is also clarifying. It forces you to stop expecting permanence from people who themselves are temporary. Another conflict that betrayal creates within the human heart is the battle between bitterness and awakening. When betrayed, the instinct is to harden, to declare never again, to build fortresses so high that no one can climb over them. The misconception here is that protection equals healing, but fortresses, while they guard, also imprison. Betrayal convinces you that vulnerability is weakness, that trust is foolishness, that closeness is a liability. Yet in constructing those beliefs, you lose the part of you that was capable of intimacy in the first place. The cruel irony is that by trying to protect yourself from betrayal, you betray yourself by denying the very openness that once made love meaningful. This internal contradiction is why betrayal is so transformative. It does not just push you against another person, but against yourself, forcing you to decide which version of you will survive. The one who shuts down, or the one who rebuilds with sharper eyes and stronger boundaries. Psychologically, betrayal is not just an injury, it is a mirror. It reflects back to you truths you did not want to see. For example, the subtle red flags you ignored now shine in memory like warning sirens. You realize you tolerated disrespect because you wanted harmony. You accepted half-love because you feared abandonment. You silenced your doubts because you craved certainty. The misconception that betrayal comes out of nowhere collapses in the harsh light of hindsight. More often than not, betrayal is not an isolated act, but the final revelation of patterns that were always there. This awareness is devastating because it makes you question your own perception. If you missed the signs once, how can you trust yourself not to miss them again? The conflict intensifies. Do you give up trusting altogether? Or do you rebuild trust on deeper foundations? It is here that many people remain trapped, not in the betrayal itself, but in the fear of ever trusting their own judgment again. Another layer of the conflict lies in society's interpretation of betrayal. Culturally, we are told to forgive and forget, as if betrayal is a minor cut, easily healed with the bandage of time. But psychology tells a different story. The nervous system does not easily forget betrayal. It encodes it as a survival threat. Your body remembers the anxiety, the sleepless nights, the racing thoughts, the shame of being deceived, and because of this, the misconception that betrayal is temporary collapses. It is not something you move on from quickly. It rewires you. It changes the way you evaluate relationships, the way you hear promises, the way you interpret silence. Even when years pass, the shadow of betrayal can whisper in your mind whenever trust is required again. This is not weakness, it is human design. The mind protects itself by remembering, and that memory becomes both a burden and a guide. Finally, the most haunting misconception is that betrayal is about punishment, that it happens to you because you were not enough, strong enough, smart enough, worthy enough to be protected from it. But betrayal is not about your inadequacy. It is about the other person's inability to honor what they held in their hands. Yet the conflict this creates within you is immense. On one side, you understand that their actions reveal their character, not your value. On the other side, you cannot silence the voice that says you should have been different, should have seen it sooner, should have loved better, trusted less, demanded more. This is where betrayal breaks people. Not in the act itself, but in the war it ignites within them. The war between blame and acceptance, between anger and understanding, between shutting down and daring to live with open eyes again. And so betrayal does not just divide people from one another, it divides you from yourself, until you decide how you will interpret it, and more importantly, how you will live beyond it. Think back to the first time someone you trusted completely betrayed you. The moment is never just about what they did. It is about how the world suddenly shifted in an instant. 1 second you were standing on stable ground, and the next the floor disappeared beneath you. The silence that follows betrayal is unlike any other. It is not simply the absence of words, but the collapse of an entire reality you thought you knew. You remember sitting there, stunned, staring at the ceiling or into the night, unable to process how something that felt so safe could unravel so quickly. The betrayal itself hurts, yes, but the aftershock is what breaks you. The realization that the person you confided in, the one you gave your most vulnerable pieces to, has turned those very pieces into weapons against you. The emotional experience is not just heartbreak, it is disorientation, as if you have woken up in a foreign land where nothing makes sense anymore. The emotions that surface in the aftermath are layered and often contradictory. Rage and humiliation sit beside grief and longing, while numbness occasionally blankets everything in a strange quiet. Betrayal makes you feel foolish, because it is not only about being wronged, but about realizing you trusted someone who never deserved it. You feel exposed, as though everyone around you can see your weakness, your naivety, your blind faith. There is an almost physical ache, a heaviness in the chest, because betrayal is not just mental, it inhabits the body. Your heart races at night, your stomach twists at random times, and your body carries the memory of the violation even when you try to distract your mind. And perhaps the cruelest part of it all is the craving for the very person who hurt you. You replay conversations, you imagine them apologizing, you secretly wish for reconciliation, even as you know deep down that trust can never return. That contradiction tears you apart, because the same hands that broke you are the ones you still find yourself reaching for in the dark. The social dimension of betrayal adds another weight to carry. When you share your pain with others, you sometimes notice how easily they dismiss it. They say things like, "It happens," or "You'll get over it," as if betrayal were just a minor inconvenience. But they cannot see the nights you spend awake, staring at the ceiling, reliving every detail, every word, searching for where it all went wrong. They cannot feel the humiliation of realizing you defended someone's loyalty in front of others, only to be proven a fool. They cannot understand how betrayal makes you want to disappear, not just from the betrayer, but from the eyes of the world, because you fear their judgment almost as much as you feel your own. In these moments, betrayal feels isolating, as though the world continues spinning, but you are trapped in an endless replay of the moment you were broken. And because society rarely gives betrayal the gravity it deserves, you end up carrying the weight in silence, adding loneliness to the pile of wounds. Then comes the transformation, often disguised as bitterness. At first, you build walls. You say to yourself, "Never again." You armor your heart with coldness, with suspicion, with sharp words meant to cut before others can cut you. Betrayal convinces you that kindness is weakness, that openness is a liability, that love is a gamble you can no longer afford. And so you walk into new relationships with eyes narrowed, with your guard raised, always scanning for hidden motives. This stage feels protective, but it is exhausting. You begin to realize that living in constant defense robs you of joy just as much as betrayal itself did. You notice how laughter feels forced, how trust feels impossible, how you are haunted by shadows even in the presence of light. The transformation betrayal offers is not always graceful. It is often messy, angry, and cynical. But in that chaos, something else begins to stir. The faint recognition that your survival is not in walls, but in learning to trust differently, more wisely, without surrendering yourself blindly again. Personal realizations often come in quiet moments, long after the betrayal has occurred. Perhaps it is while walking alone at night or sitting in a cafe watching strangers interact, when you suddenly understand that betrayal was not a random curse but a mirror. It reflected back the places where you ignored your intuition, the moments when you felt unease but silenced it in the name of loyalty, the signs that were always there but that you didn't want to see. And though this recognition stings, it is also liberating. You realize that betrayal was not only their act, but your lesson. It taught you about boundaries, about the necessity of self-respect, about the difference between love that uplifts and attachment that destroys. The emotional experience shifts from helplessness to clarity, and though it does not erase the pain, it reframes it. You stop asking why it happened to you and start asking what it is trying to teach you, and slowly you begin to see yourself not as a victim of betrayal, but as a student of its harsh wisdom. There is also a social criticism buried within every betrayal, one that few people articulate but many feel. Betrayal reveals the performative nature of modern relationships, the way people promise loyalty when it is convenient, the way words are used as currency to secure trust without the commitment to uphold them. It makes you see how often love is spoken of as unconditional when in reality it is transactional, how loyalty is preached but rarely practiced, how people wear masks of sincerity while harboring secret agendas. When you experience betrayal firsthand, you cannot help but notice its patterns in the world around you. You see it in politics, in business, in friendships built on convenience rather than truth. And this realization is both infuriating and enlightening. It forces you to question not just individuals, but the culture of dishonesty that allows betrayal to thrive. You begin to wonder if we live in a world where loyalty is an exception, not the rule. And that realization reshapes the way you engage with everyone you meet. And finally, the emotional experiences of betrayal often converge into a paradoxical gratitude. It does not come immediately. It emerges after the storms, after the bitterness, after the endless nights of questioning. Gratitude not for the act itself, but for the person you became because of it. You realize that betrayal stripped you of illusions, that it forced you to discover strength you never knew you had, that it taught you to rely less on the shifting loyalties of others and more on the solid ground of your own character. The same experience that nearly destroyed you becomes the fire that forged a sharper, wiser, more resilient self. And those scars remain. They no longer feel like disfigurements, but like marks of survival. The emotional journey of betrayal is long, painful, and deeply human. It takes you through rage, humiliation, isolation, and clarity, until you arrive at a place where you can look back and see the storm not only as devastation, but as transformation. There comes a moment after betrayal when the noise fades, the anger quiets, the tears dry, and the chaos that once consumed you begins to settle into a strange stillness. It is in that silence where strength begins to take root. At first you mistake it for emptiness, for numbness, for the absence of feeling. But slowly you realize that what you are experiencing is not emptiness at all. It is space. Space where illusions once lived, space where dependency once thrived, space where you once filled the cracks of your being with the presence of someone else. Betrayal takes them away, but in doing so, it hands you back yourself. It strips the noise of distraction and leaves you face to face with the rawest form of solitude. And while that solitude is frightening, it is also sacred, because it is the soil from which real strength grows. Strength after betrayal does not come in grand displays or dramatic acts of resilience. It begins quietly, almost invisibly. It is in the decision to get out of bed when you'd rather stay buried in blankets. It is in the ability to smile faintly at a stranger after weeks of avoiding eye contact. It is in the moment you choose to take a walk instead of spiraling into bitterness. These small victories do not feel like triumphs at first, but they are. Each one is a declaration that you are no longer defined by what was taken from you. Each one whispers that you are more powerful than the pain that tried to consume you. Strength in this way is not loud. It does not roar. It hums quietly, like a current flowing beneath the surface, steady and unbreakable. As you begin to move through this process, you start to rediscover your own worth. Betrayal has a way of convincing you that you were not enough. That if you had been smarter, stronger, prettier, more patient, less demanding, maybe you would not have been abandoned. But slowly the fog lifts and you begin to understand that betrayal was never a reflection of your inadequacy. It was a mirror of their limitations, their failure to honor loyalty, their inability to handle truth, their weakness in choosing dishonesty over courage. That is their weight to carry, not yours. Realizing this is an awakening. You start to see that your worth is not something given to you by someone else's loyalty or validated by their consistency. It is yours, inherent, untouchable. And the more you lean into that truth, the less power betrayal holds over you. This awakening often feels like light seeping into a darkened room. At first, it is faint, barely noticeable, but once it enters, it cannot be ignored. You start noticing how much strength you possess, simply because you survived. You survived nights of anguish, days of heaviness, moments when you felt like you would shatter completely, and yet you are still here. That realization itself is powerful. Betrayal did not destroy you. It revealed you. It revealed the parts of you that can withstand storms, the parts of you that bend but do not break, the parts of you that shine even when the world around you feels cruel and dishonest. Your scars begin to tell a different story. They are no longer marks of defeat but of endurance. They are proof that you faced the darkest sides of human nature and still found light inside yourself. In solitude, you learn something that the noise of relationships often drowns out: the beauty of your own company. Where once you may have felt desperation to fill silence with someone else's presence, you now start to embrace that silence as a companion. You discover the strength in sitting alone with your thoughts, in finding peace in your own breath, in hearing the quiet wisdom that emerges only when the world is no longer distracting you. This solitude is not loneliness. It is intimacy with yourself, and in that intimacy, you reclaim the self you once abandoned to please others, to hold on to relationships that did not honor you. The awakening is not about never trusting again, but about realizing that the first and most important trust you must build is with yourself. The scar of betrayal will always remain, but it is not a wound that keeps bleeding. Over time, it becomes a symbol of survival, a reminder of who you are and what you have endured. Scars, after all, are the body's way of saying, "You healed here." And that is exactly what your soul begins to echo. You healed here. You found strength here. You discovered your worth here. This recognition transforms your perspective on the pain. You stop wishing it had never happened and start recognizing what it gave you. A deeper understanding of loyalty, a sharper awareness of human nature, and an unshakable respect for your own resilience. The scar no longer chains you to the past. It propels you forward into a future where you no longer settle for half-love, half-truths, or half-commitments. What betrayal ultimately awakens in you is a new way of living. You stop chasing validation from others and begin nurturing validation from within. You stop begging for loyalty from those unwilling to give it and instead pour your loyalty into yourself, your growth, your peace. You stop fearing solitude and start cherishing it as the place where your spirit renews itself. This is the gift of awakening. To realize that strength is not the absence of pain, but the presence of courage. That self-worth is not about being chosen by others, but about choosing yourself. That awakening is not a sudden moment of clarity, but a gradual, steady becoming of who you were always meant to be. Betrayal changes you forever, but not in the way most people assume. It does not leave you permanently broken, nor does it define you by the wound you endured. What it truly does is awaken you to a deeper reality, that human beings are fragile, flawed, and often guided by their own fears and desires more than by loyalty or truth. This awakening is painful because it forces you to release the illusions you once clung to. The comforting idea that promises were unshakable or that relationships could be guarantees, and yet, in releasing those illusions, you step into a form of freedom you never had before. You stop demanding that others complete you, and you stop handing them the keys to your self-worth. This realization is not born in joy but in suffering, yet it is precisely that suffering which sculpts the foundation of your new strength. You come to see betrayal not as a definition of your weakness, but as the evidence that you have survived the collapse of everything you once believed, and are still capable of standing. The revolution that follows betrayal is not loud or external. It is quiet and inward. At first you may believe that healing requires proving something to others, showing them you are better off without them, seeking validation from new connections or achievements. But time teaches you that these pursuits only replicate the same cycle of dependency. The real transformation does not happen when others recognize your worth. It happens when you recognize it yourself, even in silence, even when no one is watching. The revolution of the self is not about becoming untouchable or invincible. It is about learning to walk with openness while no longer being naive. About carrying scars without letting them harden you into bitterness. It is about trusting again. Not recklessly, but with discernment. Knowing that if betrayal comes again, it cannot destroy the self you have rebuilt on solid ground. This inner revolution is not dramatic but enduring. The kind of change that shapes the way you carry yourself for the rest of your life. As you reflect on betrayal and its aftermath, you begin to understand that true power has never been in controlling others, in forcing loyalty, or in securing promises that people may or may not keep. True power is in the ability to face yourself with honesty, to confront the parts of you that longed for validation, that tolerated half-truths, that allowed illusions to blind you. When you face those parts without judgment, you no longer fear them, and in no longer fearing them, you become free. The great irony is that betrayal, which once felt like chains binding you in humiliation, eventually becomes the key that unlocks your own liberation. It teaches you that external validation can be taken away at any moment, but the respect you cultivate for yourself can never be stolen. This realization allows you to walk differently, less desperate, more grounded, and more discerning. The revolution is not in proving anyone wrong, but in never again betraying yourself for the comfort of temporary loyalty. In this journey, scars play a central role. They are not blemishes to be hidden, but reminders of the storms you have endured. Every scar speaks of nights you thought you wouldn't make it through, and yet you did. Every scar is a quiet declaration that you survived what once seemed impossible. When you begin to honor those scars instead of resenting them, you shift from shame to pride. You understand that scars are the body's way of saying, "Here, you healed." The soul is no different. The scars of betrayal are where your spirit mended, where you rebuilt yourself stronger, wiser, and more whole. They become part of your story, not as symbols of defeat, but as evidence of your resilience. And in embracing them, you no longer hide from your past. You carry it with dignity, letting it remind you of how far you've come and how much further you are capable of going. The call of betrayal, once you move through its fires, is not to close your heart, but to open it differently. It is not to retreat into bitterness, but to walk with awareness. It is not to stop trusting, but to trust with your eyes open, to give loyalty where it is earned, not where it is demanded. This shift is subtle yet profound. You begin to live not from a place of fear, of being hurt again, but from a place of confidence that even if you are hurt again, you will survive, you will heal, and you will not lose yourself. That knowledge alone is power. It liberates you from clinging too tightly, from begging for loyalty, from mistaking attachment for love. You realize that the greatest relationship you can ever have is with yourself, and from that relationship flows the ability to create healthier bonds with others. The awakening is not a call to isolate, but to engage with the world from a place of wholeness rather than need. In the end, the deepest truth betrayal leaves you with is this: the greatest betrayal is not what someone else does to you, but what you do to yourself when you forget who you are. And the greatest loyalty you can ever give is not to another person's promises, but to your own inner truth. This is where the pain of betrayal transforms into wisdom, where scars become strength, where solitude becomes peace. The revolution was never about them. It was always about you. The real victory is not in changing others, but in returning to yourself, again and again, no matter what storms arise. And so you walk forward, not with bitterness, but with clarity, not with cynicism, but with wisdom, not with fear, but with the quiet power of someone who knows that no matter who stays or who leaves, your worth remains untouchable. That is the gift of betrayal. It took from you what was never truly yours, and it gave back to you what can never be taken away.